Here's why you're wrong about Mary. Look, I get it. You've probably heard people say that Catholics talk too much about Mary, that we put her on a pedestal, that all this devotion to the Mother of God is somehow taking away from Jesus. But what if I told you that some of the greatest saints in church history would completely disagree with that? What if the truth is actually the exact opposite of what you've been hearing? Today, we're diving into something that's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about devotion to Mary. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why one of the church's greatest saints said something that sounds absolutely crazy at first. Of Mary, there's never enough. So who was the saint who made such a bold claim? His name was Louis-Marie Grignion de Montfort, and he lived in France during the late 1600s and early 1700s. This guy wasn't just some random priest who had a soft spot for Mary. He was one of the most powerful preachers of his time, someone who sparked spiritual revivals everywhere he went, and a man who dedicated his entire life to spreading devotion to the Mother of God. But here's the thing, Saint Louis de Montfort knew exactly what people were saying. He knew that even in his own time, there were critics who thought Marian devotion was excessive, that it was too much, that Christians should focus solely on Jesus and leave Mary out of the picture. Sound familiar? It's the same argument we hear today hundreds of years later. And yet Saint Louis de Montfort wasn't backing down. In fact, he doubled down. He wrote one of the most influential books on Marian devotion ever written, called True Devotion to Mary, and in it, he made his case crystal clear. The problem we face today is actually the same problem that existed back then. People misunderstand Mary's role. They see devotion to her as competition with Jesus, when it's actually the complete opposite. They think that honoring Mary means we're somehow dishonoring Christ. But St. Louis de Montfort saw through this confusion. He understood something profound that many people miss. Let me paint you a picture of what St. Louis de Montfort saw when he looked at the reality of Mary in the spiritual realm. He didn't just see a historical figure who lived 2,000 years ago and then faded into the background. He saw something so much bigger. Every single day, from one corner of the earth to the other, from the highest heights of heaven to the deepest depths of existence, everything is preaching about Mary, everything is proclaiming her greatness. The 9 choirs of angels, people of every age, every gender, every condition, every religion, the good and the bad, and yes, even the demons themselves, whether they want to or not, are forced by the sheer weight of truth to call her blessed? Think about that for a second. Even the demons, even the forces of darkness that hate everything good and holy, even they cannot deny the blessed status of Mary. That's how powerful her role is in salvation history. That's how undeniable her importance is in God's plan. Saint Bonaventure, another great saint and theologian, tells us something incredible about the angels. He says that all the angels in heaven are crying out to Mary constantly, saying, "Holy, holy Mother of God and Virgin." These are the same angels who worship before the throne of God, singing praises to the Almighty. And yet they also honor Mary in a unique and special way. The angels don't just honor her once in a while or on special occasions. They offer her the angelical salutation, the Ave Maria, millions and millions of times every single day. Can you imagine that? Millions of times a day, the angels are prostrating themselves before Mary and begging her in her graciousness to give them some command, to honor them with her instructions. And here's something that might surprise you even more. Saint Michael the Archangel, the prince of the heavenly court, the warrior angel who cast Satan out of heaven, the commander of God's armies, even he is described by Saint Augustine as being the most zealous in honoring Mary and making sure she is honored by others. If Saint Michael, who stands in the direct presence of God, who is one of the most powerful created beings in existence, if he considers it his mission to honor Mary and promote devotion to her, what does that tell us? It tells us that honoring Mary is not something that takes away from God. It's something that the angels themselves, who are in perfect union with God's will, consider to be part of their sacred duty. But it's not just in heaven where Mary's glory is proclaimed. The whole earth is full of her glory, especially among Christians who have taken her as a protector. Think about how many kingdoms throughout history have placed themselves under Mary's protection. How many provinces, dioceses, and cities bear her name or are consecrated to her? Walk into any major city in the Christian world, and you'll find cathedrals consecrated to God under Mary's name. Notre Dame in Paris, Notre Dame in Montreal, the list goes on and on. These aren't just buildings. They're monuments to the fact that for centuries, Christians understood something important. They understood that honoring Mary is part of honoring God's plan. There isn't a single church without an altar dedicated to her honor. Not one country, not one region where Christianity has taken root, where you won't find miraculous images of Mary. Places where people have experienced healings, conversions, and miracles through her intercession. Why? Why has this devotion spread so far and so deep? Why have Christians throughout the centuries felt this pull toward honoring Jesus' mother? Is it because they're confused? Is it because they don't understand theology? Or is it because they're tapping into something real, something that the saints understood clearly? Saint Louis de Montfort's answer to all of this is simple but profound. After considering all these realities, after seeing how heaven and earth proclaim Mary's glory, after understanding her unique role in salvation history, he cries out with all the saints, De Maria numquam satis. In English, of Mary, there is never enough. Never enough. Think about what he's saying here. He's not saying that Mary is equal to God. He's not saying she's divine. He's saying that no matter how much we honor her, no matter how much we talk about her, no matter how much we praise her role in our salvation, it will never be enough to match the reality of who she is and what she's done. This is where it all comes together. This is the key moment where we need to understand what's really going on. When we honor Mary, we're not taking anything away from Jesus. We're actually honoring Jesus by honoring the mother he gave us. We're recognizing his choice, his plan, his wisdom in working through her. Jesus didn't have to come into the world through a human mother. God could have appeared as a full-grown man, but he didn't. He chose to enter humanity through Mary's womb. He chose to be dependent on her as an infant. He chose to be raised by her. He chose to work his first miracle at her request. He chose from the cross to give her to us as our mother. Every one of those choices means something. Every one of those choices tells us that Mary's role is not something we invented or exaggerated. It's something God himself designed. When Saint Louis de Montfort says we can never say enough about Mary, he's responding to a deep spiritual truth. He's saying that the more we understand about her, the more we realize how much more there is to understand. The more we honor her, the more we realize how worthy she is of honor. The more we love her, the more we realize how much she deserves our love. But here's what makes this even more powerful. This isn't just ancient history or theological theory. This is meant to be personal. Saint Louis de Montfort is challenging us with a question that cuts right to the heart of our spiritual lives. Is devotion to Jesus' mother actually part of your devotion to Jesus? Have you really considered how her unique role in the world's salvation deserves your gratitude and your praise? Or have you been holding back because of misconceptions? Because of what others have said? Because you're worried it might be too much? The saints understood something that we often miss in our modern world. They understood that love isn't a limited resource. Honoring Mary doesn't mean we have less honor for Jesus. Loving Mary doesn't mean we love Jesus less. In fact, it's the opposite. The more we understand Mary's role, the more we understand Jesus' love for us. The more we honor her, the more we honor his plan. Saint Alphonsus Liguori, another great saint and doctor of the Church, put it beautifully in one of his prayers. He said, "I love you, Mary, my mother, and I wish I could speak with 1,000 tongues, so that all might know your greatness, your holiness, your mercy, and the love with which you love all those who love you." 1,000 tongues. That's how the saints felt. They felt like human language wasn't enough to express Mary's greatness. They felt like no matter how much they praised her, they were still falling short of the reality. And this is exactly what Saint Louis de Montfort means when he says, of Mary, there is never enough. It's not that we should obsess over Mary to the exclusion of everything else. It's that we should never feel like we've honored her too much, praised her too much, or loved her too much. Because in reality, compared to who she truly is and what she truly deserves, we're always going to fall short. Think about it this way. If the angels in heaven who see God face to face, who understand spiritual realities far better than we ever could on earth, if they are constantly honoring Mary and praising her millions of times a day, how can we possibly think we're doing too much by saying a Hail Mary? How can we think we're being excessive by asking for her prayers? The truth is, most of us aren't doing too much. Most of us are doing too little. We've been scared away from Marian devotion by critics who don't understand it. We've been told that it's excessive or wrong or that it takes away from Jesus. But the saints, the angels, and the entire tradition of the Church tell us something completely different. Mary is not a distraction from Jesus. She's a path to him. She's not in competition with Christ. She's in perfect cooperation with him. She doesn't take glory away from God, she reflects it and magnifies it. That's literally what she said in her prayer, the Magnificat. My soul magnifies the Lord. That's her entire purpose, to magnify Jesus, to make him bigger in our eyes, to bring us closer to him. When you honor Mary, you're not dishonoring Jesus. You're following his example. You're accepting the gift he gave you from the cross when he said, "Behold your mother." You're joining with the angels and saints in recognizing the incredible role God chose for her. So where does this leave us? What are we supposed to do with all of this? St. Louis de Montfort gives us the answer. We need to reconsider our relationship with Mary. We need to ask ourselves honestly, if devotion to Jesus. Mother is really part of our devotion to Jesus, because if it's not, we're missing something huge. We're missing a gift that God himself gave us. The angels know something we often forget. They know that honoring Mary is not optional. It's not something only for certain types of Catholics or certain spiritual personalities. It's something that flows naturally from understanding who Jesus is and what he's done for us. If Jesus chose her, if he honored her, if he gave her to us, then honoring her is honoring his choice, his wisdom, his plan. This is not about adding extra prayers to your routine or following some complicated devotional practice. This is about opening your heart to the mother that Jesus gave you. It's about recognizing that when God chose to enter the world, he chose to do it through Mary, and that choice has eternal significance. The Church has understood this from the very beginning. The early Christians honored Mary. The Church Fathers wrote about her. The councils defined her role. The saints devoted their lives to spreading love for her. And all of that happened not because people were confused or misguided, but because they were tapping into a profound spiritual truth. Mary's role in salvation history is unique. She's the Mother of God. She's the new Eve. She's the Queen of Heaven. She's our mother. And none of those titles take anything away from Jesus. They all point to him. They all magnify his glory. They all reveal more about God's incredible plan for our salvation. When St. Louis de Montfort says, "Of Mary, there is never enough," he's inviting us into a deeper understanding of our faith. He's challenging us to stop holding back out of fear or misunderstanding. He's telling us that the more we honor Mary, the more we'll understand Jesus. The more we love her, the more we'll love him. The more we turn to her, the more she leads us to him. This isn't about outdated medieval piety or cultural traditions. This is about the spiritual reality that the angels see clearly and that the saints understood deeply. This is about accepting the full gift that God has given us in the Incarnation, which includes the incredible role he gave to Mary. So maybe it's time to rethink everything you've heard about Marian devotion. Maybe it's time to stop worrying about whether it's too much and start embracing what God has given us. Maybe it's time to join your voice with the angels and saints and say, "Of Mary, there is never enough." Because at the end of the day, this isn't about following rules or trying to be super spiritual. It's about love. It's about recognizing that God loved us so much that he gave us his own mother to be our mother too. And if that's true, if that's really what God did for us, then how can we ever say we've honored her enough? How can we ever say we've loved her too much? Subscribe if this changed how you think about Mary.